together and keep thinking how we are actually going to work together to make happen all the transformations and things that we are doing.
And what was the core entry point for what you were discussing around how we should set up the team today? What was what were you discussing in more concrete detail?
Well, it's a lot about when we get into the points of developing something, we need to be very, very efficient as well and get to the point of industrializing the solutions that we are building. Also to create the right momentum in the organization, right? It's similar to many different organizations. We all face challenges around how fast can we move, how efficient we are doing things, and how do we actually collaborate across the organization. So we have designed different roles and we have designed different areas in the team. So we create the maximum impact with the resources and the technologies that we have in-house. There is a lot of quite interesting new roles that we have created as well in our organization that actually are making a huge impact and differentiation on how do we actually make the change happen and how do we drive change management. Sometimes when we talk about AI, we talk about data, we forget that it's all about change, right?
Oh, we have so many topics coming out of this. But to stay on the team topic now, interestingly enough, I'm very, very closely in these kind of conversations on a data DevOps and DevOps data and analytics teams in Scania right now. And we are doing a lot of conversations around trying to understand sort of what is our value stream teams, sort of the offering-oriented teams versus what is our sort of enablement teams and product teams. So is that kind of also to try to understand and synthesize what is the core contribution and mission and flavor of different teams? Because I can imagine when it grows and both Scania and Ericsson has a global footprint, it's not only one team, right?
No,
they need to work on different things. So could you elaborate a little bit on your your concrete thinking here?
I mean, it has been very similar to what you mentioned, right? So we started as a one setup of organization, just looking at making use cases running. And we adopted the Agile methodology and we start working with different types of teams to put them with different profiles together to generate value to the organization.
And these profiles, is that like a cross-functional team around a use case domain area?
And then it's a domain expert, a subject matter expert in the area, together with data people, together with data scientists, data engineers, and different profiles together with architects to come up with a proposition, a product, a digital product that will change or enable something in our flow. Right, of our processes.
And you use the word product here, which I find really interesting, because when we create something in analytics and we want the users or the organization to be able to consume it effectively to get the value, we need to think carefully of how it will be used so it's seamlessly used in their daily work.
Exactly. And my experience has always been, sometimes we run quite quickly into the technology. We develop a solution. And sometimes we forget that it's a product. Yeah. People need to adopt it and they need to create the value to their day-to-day work. That it might change ways of working, it might change perhaps also the way things were done, not only the way of working, but also the actual nature of the work will change.
I'm so with you here. And we have a topic coming up here. Have you heard the expression, the last mile of analytics?
Yes.
Yeah. And we've been playing around with that. We say the last mile is the first mile. Understand how it will be used and what the problem, So there are many things to understand around this adoption topic that really flips the way you need to think about what my team needs to be able to cater for. It's not only ideation. It's not only technicality or data science to come up with an algorithm. It's also about how it will be used and how we will be adopting it. And in a global conversation, this last part of the challenge is huge, right? Because now you're doing something maybe in a team in Stockholm, Kista, and you are thinking about how should the team in Peru use this and how should I support, so this becomes huge.
Yeah. So, and then of course is where the network and the the different drivers of what we call the digitalization, and how do we actually engage the rest of the organization to do this, right? And to not only it's not really only about adopting the tool, but the reasons why they need to change it, what is in for them to do it, right? So I know, I mean, it's a big journey for many different companies to find the right model. And I also think that every organization finds different ways to do it. And sometimes some organizations find one model that works for them in their setup, in the way that they're organized, in
the context of their whole global organization.
Exactly. And others, like in Ericsson, or we've done before in others, in companies like in Electrolux or DHL where I work, we found a different way to do it, right? And every company, depending the systems, the culture and the values that you have, you find the way to do it, the model, right? That operating model that allow us to do that work. And it's a combination of the people, the technology you choose because of your legacy, and the processes that you have. So then you identify what needs to be changed.
But because if we go down now if we stay on the team topic here, one of the books or best practices that I've been sort of getting more and more deeper into has been on the conversation of team topologies. Have you read the book, or have you heard about the concept of team topologies?
No, not actually, no.
Okay. And I think it fits 100% well into platform thinking, agility and all that. And it's basically to understand, if you build a platform, you end up with teams with different characteristics and basically different OKRs. Yeah. And simply put, we can distinguish between a value stream oriented, like a product team, cross-functional, solving a real business problem, a use case. And then when you scale, you might have other teams which are focusing on the platform to speed up the work of the different use case teams. So if you can imagine, if you have one use case team and one platform, it's not a problem. If I have 20 value streams, use case teams, that basically we don't want them to reinvent the wheel on the infrastructure side, like DevOps topics. Absolutely. Then all of a sudden we have a team which has a horizontal understanding, and their KPI is not the use case value. Their KPI is total cost of ownership. Their KPI is scalability, reusability. So here now we this is now team topologies. We're starting to understand the value stream, vertical team, the horizontal style team, and then we can discuss, okay, and how do we deal with legacy? Okay, here we have another topology. We have the subsystem expert team. You need to know Cobalt, right, or Fortran, because you have an old super system. So what's the team composition here that works with the platform team? That Exactly. So this has been on my mind a lot lately, to try to understand on how to scale this up. Yeah. Do you follow this?
Absolutely. I mean, I can just recognize all the day-to-day activities that we do. Yeah. Because I mean, you're right? I mean, I was talking to a colleague yesterday exactly around this topic. We say, look, many people can now generate something on their PC. When we talk about AI, we can generate a model. It's a PLC. We show it to somebody, and great, it works. When you actually want to industrialize this, when you actually want people to use it
at scale,
exactly. Like we're talking about hundreds, thousands of users at the same time using one solution, getting a recommendation from an AI, or choosing 3 different alternatives of people to work with, I don't know. Then it needs to be in a solid platform. And you're right, it's not really, might be not even the same profiles of the team members that actually need to work on that. Because for now, then you need actually to secure operations. You need to secure that the machines are running. You need to secure that there is a service level. And you need to secure, on the other hand, that you need to cater for new ideas coming up from the business requirements and keep scaling up, right? And breaking it down in multiple pieces. But sometimes also, what I've noticed, I'm now thinking quite a lot about the innovation piece of all of this. Because very often, if I think about a very legacy system, right? It can also lead to teams getting stuck too much into just the operational industrialization things.
Yes.
You also need to have and cater for the innovation, the one that continuously will disrupt even what the new thing that you have created that needs to disrupt it one more time. And if you don't have that mentality, that continuous disruption, continuous change, continuous improvement, you might end up that the new solution that you created and industrialized becomes legacy very soon. That's what keeps me awake.
But here we have another pet conversation we can talk about for my sake. I've been trying to understand this mindset shift when you're basically, your ideology is the traditional economies of scale. We draw swimming lanes of our process, fairly stable environments. Mm-hmm. And then you're moving into a situation where the innovation pressure is increasing, the productivity frontier is accelerating, the innovation pace that we need to deal with. All of a sudden, everything changes in terms of how do we organize to basically, on a daily basis, reinvent ourselves, which is crazy, right?
It's crazy.
But if you follow, you have Kurzweil's law of accelerating returns, right? Yeah. That it really highlights the exponentiality of innovation. You have Metcalfe's law of network effects and what happens, when we start stringing new things together. It all points in the same direction, that this is exponentiality. So it's not going to slow down. It's just going to go faster and faster and faster. Exactly. And my main understanding, together with Mikael Klingvall, who has been on this show before.
I see him.
Yeah, it's crazy because all of a sudden we start talking about economies of learning, or ability to adapt and relearn is what counts.
Yeah.
And then not only for the individual, but for the team and also for the operating model.
Yeah.
Because sometimes our operating model is all about industrialization of what we know.
Yeah.
And we have a really, really hard time bringing in the new innovation. It becomes almost a clash.
Exactly.
So this is an interesting topic, right?
It is. And I'm fully with you when you say, imagine, that happens to individuals, but you need to change. And you're asked, some people have, especially generations with the digital mindset, but also generations that have gone through huge changes in life. Yeah. And it's not only the new generations that are ready for that, right? But it's how you combine them, how you make them actually work and get the best out of it. Yeah. And then, of course, I think, I've been working in very large companies, so I know how difficult it is sometimes to just get a huge organization to change. A huge organization might be a team performs really well, might be an individual, and changes and continuously disrupt and change within. The interesting part is when you do it with large organizations, when very large organizations start taking that approach, also reinventing again and again and again.
And here we can talk about culture and mindset and all this, but how to change culture and mindset in a large organization is a little bit to understand that maybe the mindset and culture is a result out of our core mandates, our core mechanisms. What KPIs do we have that fosters innovation versus what mandates and KPIs do we have that fosters efficiency, so to speak, on what we know? Yeah. And so I think this becomes very, very interesting when you have a large enterprise that how do we set up our steering mechanisms, our that values these things in balance with being efficient on what we know. It's really hard.
No, it is hard. And it's and again, this is, I believe, sometimes it's not one answer fits everyone, right? It really depends sometimes on the type of organization and the history, the pressure, the urgency in a certain moment of time that allow us to take those steps. But innovation, and especially in the digital economy, it's sometimes we think we need to innovate and do the hackathons, of course, right? But it's when we realize that the innovation needs to happen every single day. And then chapter 4, that innovation comes into a system of production, a production system.
We speak the same language, because it's what you're saying, a hackathon or shooting New Year's rocket is fantastic and we get energized. Yeah. But how fast can we do it and do the cycle from idea to commercial monetization in reality at scale?
Yes.
Because all of a sudden now, what is an innovation until we actually proven that it works? We can have great ideas, but what is innovative? Well, it doesn't prove it's innovative until it's proven to work.
Exactly. Because the value.
So when we look at innovation, it's the whole system from idea generation to idea sorting and from discovery to filtering, from filtering to creation of something new, and then from creation of something new to adoption, ramping up, industrializing.
Yes.
So the innovation dilemma or problem, is it really a problem of coming up with great ideas? Or actually, if we look at our prototype graveyard, a lot of the great ideas are there. It was our failure to execute or to industrialize that really was the innovation failure.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the hard part.
And we have so many examples in the history, right? I mean, many innovations that actually had happened so many years ago.
Exactly.
But either there was not the right moment in the market, or the company was not ready to actually do the execution to conquer market share and to actually enable the society to use it. That is, we have so many examples, and those examples happen all the time in big organizations. Right.
So I will put innovation to the list here of topics, but we want to have a great conversation today. So I must welcome you properly, Danffer Navarro from Ericsson, joining us here today.
Thank you.
I'm really, really excited around
Super
this.
Happy to be here.
And you've had many interesting roles from Electrolux all the way up into Ericsson through your career. So I'm really keen to learn how you ended up in your thinking where you are today, because already now, in the first minutes, I usually say, I have goosebumps moments when someone says something really smart, and yes, I wish I could say that smart. You already done that to me today.
Great.
That's good. Good. But who are you, Danffer? Could you just introduce yourself a little bit?
No, awesome. I mean, again, super happy to be here. I come from Peru, so I'm going to tell you a bit my story, how I ended up in Stockholm and Sweden. And
in AI space.
And in the AI space, right? So it has been a journey, and I study economics. That has been my background. And in economics, I work in strategy. I work in developing macroeconomics models. Econometrics was one of my favorite topics. I remember being called a bit like, are you the only one that really likes that? No, but we had a great teacher. He pushed us the boundaries of econometrics, right? And that's when I discovered a bit of a passion for computers and IT and systems moving and creating a model. So I was always enjoying that course. And one time I remember, I say, this could be a fun thing to do. It could be a fun work, to work in econometrics. Mm-hmm. And that time had a bit more of a fancy name, quantitative analytics, or quantitative analysis was called, right, at scale. We didn't have the supercomputers we have today. So, but I studied there. I've done many things and worked in the telecom industry, in the airline industry in Peru. Then in the airline industry in finance and in sales. I decided to do an MBA. I went to Rotterdam, in Rotterdam School of Management in RSM. It was a fantastic experience. Great colleagues, great people, a lot of inspiration. In that MBA, through my career, I realized, this econometric time is actually coming back, because before I was much into building solutions and models, and I was kind of the first adopters of the Excel, all the Excel functions that you could find. That was not the time where you didn't have any more these visualization tools or anything like that, right? So you still had something. There was Excel and other tools that you manage. And so I did the MBA. In the MBA, I love the statistics. I remember. I was actually probably one of you that really loved the statistics. And I felt, wow, this is super exciting. I mean, this is one of the things that I really want to work on, right? So after the MBA, I went to DHL. I worked in Germany, in Bonn. fantastic experience with a lot of great colleagues. And I had the luxury again to have great people that believed in me and gave me opportunities to do sales performance in that moment. So, and I went deep into that was my opportunity. Now I actually will learn and understand everything, how you create a system to visualize things and put all the numbers together. So we got the greatest sales performance in the group, right? And we did that. So it was a great experience, and that's how I learned. And I developed in the very early ages of data scientist, start developing things myself. And even though my role was as a senior expert into performance management, right? So
performance management within the domain of sales, and in the context of your company, trying to understand, how do we measure performance, or how can we use statistical approaches, data science approaches. What year is this?
This is now 2010. Then we are going into a more and more development, and then we realize, well, you know what? There are coming tools where you actually can visualize this in real time. You can create these performance metrics, and you can start doing forecasting with the statistics background, right? So that was my chance, and we did a lot of good things around developing those kind of models and developing those kind of things. Then life took me to Sweden. Love took me to Sweden.
The love took you to Sweden.
Yeah. So we moved to Stockholm. I continued with DHL, and then soon after I moved to Electrolux, where I work with our business intelligence function. Again, had the luxury of having great colleagues with a fantastic culture of innovation, of can-do attitude. And
which part in Electrolux were you doing?
Started in marketing. Started in marketing, sales, connected to the strategy. So I had colleagues that work, very, very smart colleagues, working the strategy of the global marketing function. And with them, we develop a lot of now sophisticated solutions, right? Data mining, collecting a lot of information all over the internet, commercializing.
And what was the business problem or business questions or decisions that you wanted to support?
We wanted to look, how do we sell better? How do we gain market share? How do we sell the Electrolux products are better position in the market, in the industry than competitors? And with all the different threats, a bit to what we were discussing a bit, with innovation, with new competitors and so on, and business models being redesigned, you of course need to position in a certain way, right? And that type of business problems, we started looking at data. So we answered the question with data, collecting data, analyzing the data, and putting metrics and a system in place. Was an easy beginning.
This is interesting, right? Because I remember from my career in these early stages of big data and everything like that. How did you cope? Were you sort of you had an idea what you needed to do, but you basically needed to build the stack. You need to understand, okay, we need capabilities to assemble data. We need capabilities to clean the data. We need the capabilities to put a model around it. Because not always did we have that out of the box in the system. We had business applications, of course, a lot of them. But the toolbox for getting the data together and understanding how to build, even if we now talk real time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, in some cases, sometimes also that is the way that to build a capability, you need to try it out and be very ambitious about what you want to do, right? And only then you realize this is what actually we have. We can build this type of capabilities. In that time, we didn't have. We had, of course, databases. We had ways and means to collect and analyze data. But that type of information that we're looking for, and it was out there, but not in our grasp, right?
So the difference is that, we have all this data. Yes, but you have it. Do you have nice API wrappers on them?
Exactly.
From the beginning, all this data is supposed to exist, but it's not at our fingertips.
No, and in that time, we didn't even think, what type of connections we had to create, and working with partners in all over the world to try to collect that information, and then
because now it's even collecting data externally or from different sets, of course.
Yeah, internal and external. But then how first how do you structure all this information that comes in such a fragmented way? How do you normalize the data? Create a model to actually put this in place. And then when we actually try out, and with a lot of fail and error, but you finally succeed to create information, that tells a lot about the capabilities and the team building in the organization, right? So because then that actually requires a lot an organization with this risk appetite to say, yes, we actually can do this. And we could buy something externally, but we also can actually do this type of work, collect this type of information and bring it, actually really utilize it for our day-to-day activities in marketing and sales, and connect it to the experience of consumers in that time with Electrolux.
But what is your idea here? Because, okay, I flip it. I think to some degree, when you want to get on a journey to really become data AI ready and work with these topics, there's not an easy way to buy yourself out of it. I mean, like you need to start thinking like, this is my core business and I need to recruit. Of course, I can have consultants and other expert companies helping me, but the mindset here, we need to be able to have this capability. Do you agree with that, or do you think there's a chance to buy this as a service?
No. Certain things you can buy it, and I think there's always this choice that you can, but it's not. I believe it's not really all the time worth it. And even if you're gonna decide to buy, you need to know what you're buying, and because you want to buy the best capabilities possible that fits the way that you work, and that fits the best way that you actually operate, right? Operate in your day-to-day business, the business problems that you actually want to solve. When you don't have that capability or mindset internally, then you might end up if trying out too many things, getting into the hype cycle of things, and losing the opportunity to actually build that and have that competence internally.
I think what you're saying now is super important and true, that the tricky point to buy this as a service are several things that you highlighted. It's to truly understand the contextual situation of the company, and therefore how should this data be used and what is the detailed granular understanding of this problem. This is number one. Number two is all about the bounded context and understanding and having the same understanding of information. And I would argue that, okay, to some degree you can have a generic understanding for retail or even for white good consumers, but then you get into the core context of the Electrolux company and how we understand our business. So you have this sort of, we need to be super close to the real business, the real domain experts in relation to the context of the steering and the setup of the company in order for data and information to make sense and be valuable and be used. Absolutely. So here we have it. So, okay, you can buy services now, but what you're saying is that like the main drivers, the main owners needs to be on the inside. Then we can outsource or buy services on snippets of things in order to support us. But to hand out the baton, you figure this out for us. Yeah. I don't think it works.
It will never work. And even, I mean, sometimes short-term things will play, but not at this level, right? And then, of course, and the way the reason also why you need to have this capability is also because you need to stitch it together. You need to connect the dots, right? And that nobody else will do it for you. You need to have the capability to, we're talking about industrialization and so on, you need to be able to understand why things are connected. Give it a business context to this, because it's connected to your business decisions. People in the field are making business decisions every day, and they need that information. It's not just a service that will solve it. It's how you connect it to other areas of the company. And that is, I think, that is also another reason why you actually need to have that level of competences, right?
And then the last part here. So basically, you need to own it and truly understand where it's going. Not until you own it on your inside can you see the network effects of understanding how different pieces of information now fit something else. Thirdly, I argue, I think it's very, very hard to get to real insight from data in an actionable, result-driven way if you don't have the sort of the normal business people, domain experts, so to speak, and the data scientists and the data engineers working on a daily basis on the same goal, on the same problem. So all of a sudden now, as long as you haven't planned to outsource your business people, you want to embed the data people very close to the problem in order for them to over time learn, tweak, test, continue, not only on the algorithm, but how we use the algorithm in daily life. And all of a sudden now, can you now have a supplier-demand relationship, or is this a cross-functional team in the end, or a very, very tightly working together?
Exactly.
So even if you're using external suppliers, that's not the point. It's like, how can you make it an embedded and infused part of the core business flow?
Yeah.
And that's the tricky point if there's a too big distance here, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's also another reason why the argument also goes in favor of trying out these cross-functional teams. Because what you explain, it pays off. Because then it actually starts people that never had the opportunity to actually experiment with new technologies, but they know the business, they know what decisions need to be taken, they know where the data is, they know where the problem is. Now they suddenly have a partner, an advisor that can tell them, this is how it could be done. And on the other hand, the technological person, the data scientist, the data engineer, they also understand a lot better. That's how you're actually using it, not just how I imagine in my prototype, right? So you break the barriers by creating this type of cross-functional teams. You could argue, yes, we tried Agile. We are also very good at Lean, and many companies actually tried with different methodologies. But this goes beyond the methodology, to my mind. This goes beyond, it's more about teams. It's about making these humans work together so they can start understanding the common goals.
And I fully agree with this. And let me test a rhetoric on you if you agree with this. Because I have used the way of thinking about this, or trying to explain the problem, what we're trying to pinpoint here. This is much more than agile. It's about the team. I love it. Because as long as you are saying, I'll give you an example. If the business people are working first on a business strategy, and then they flip a business strategy into an operating model, and then from an operating model, they flip it into ways of working and ways of steering and governing. So here now, business people who don't know exactly what can be done with technology has now, in an analog, with the best of their intentions, with their knowledge of how it was in the past, they have now imagined based from a pure business analog perspective. Then typically so this is a supply-demand relationship. So we come up with the idea in business, and now we flip it over to the fence. And so we want some report and analytics that supports this. Now, if I really want to reinvent, if I really want to have 10x effects, I need to have all the different perspectives through the whole journey. So in the ideation phase of business strategy, so is your business strategy attuned to what can be done with data and AI? So we don't have an AI strategy as a consequence of an analog business strategy. We are crafting a business strategy relevant for a data and AI world. And then we are crafting an operating model that is digital first. And then we are crafting you actually get to a different result when you have the 3-4 perspectives on the core problem in the beginning and start here versus I have the same problem, but now I take one competence and run it, and then sequentially, he did his best. Now you try to do your best. Exactly. You're not gonna end up in the same place.
No, and that has normally.
You see what I mean, right?
Absolutely.
This is the team topic that we need to have the different perspectives throughout the whole conversation.
Exactly. Otherwise, it becomes this typical waterfall that we all know in the industry, because it's a lot of handovers and. It creates handovers, in my mind, always creates inefficiencies, right? Because it's like a game of whispering something in the ear. You tell it, and then something will miss or will be said differently. Then you need a lot of documentation and so on. You work it differently when you work in these cross-functional teams. You work it out different when you connect the strategy to the digitalization, to AI, to data, because then you're actually talking the same language. And to my mind, this is very important talking about books, because I'm very much thinking all the time about business models. So when I talk about data, when I talk about AI, with my teams, with my peers, with colleagues, and we experiment around things, I always try to talk about what is the business model. Because that is how companies, like disruptive companies, change the game, right? They are the ones that innovate constantly because they're very much focused, and they ask their teams, disrupt, change the business model, challenge ourselves. Not every company is good at that. And that is probably, to me, if we want to make these teams work together cross-functionally, they need to have this higher purpose. The higher purpose needs to be about changing business model, challenge ourselves so we actually can achieve something with a new technology that is coming, because it's constantly evolving.
And I fully agree with this, but I'm going to test another way. Because sometimes when we say change business model, even I get this is so big, it's up in the air, it has nothing to do with me. But then if we think carefully, I take an example. I'm in group finance. My job is to secure the record to report process. Every large organization has a record to report process. You have to have it, right, for legal, for doing your consolidated reporting. Now, if I use the same lingo now, and then I ask myself, what is my business model for group reporting? And now we can disrupt how we understand record to report process by thinking about this as like, okay, this business model is I get this data from here. I need to take it through my systems, record to report. I need to match it in the books. And then I need to offer it to certain stakeholders. That's my business model. That's what they are paying us to do. Now how can I redo that whole business model 10x? So the business model thinking, what I'm trying to say, you can use that mindset on the aggregated scale for the whole business, of course, and then you would argue, Scania, what's the business model of a truck manufacturer? And now I'm rethinking the business model as a transport ecosystem player. Okay, this is on the highest level, strategic level. Yeah. But when I go into the company and we want to start digitizing things, we need to think like that for each process. Yeah. What's your offering? What are you doing? And how can you reinvent your... and then we would maybe call it operating model. Yeah. But essentially, it's the internal business model of group finance.
Yes.
Why are you there? Yeah. Why are you there to offer? And how can you change that?
Exactly.
Do you agree?
I fully agree. And that's the thinking, right? Because that's also, to me, I think sometimes we might get, and we have seen this example so many times, that we get stuck into show us the efficiency, show us the value, when we actually not have asked the right question before. What is exactly what we want to change? What is the process behind it? And not only that the process is already documented is valuable, because we all maybe know it very, very well, but how do we challenge that? Because that is where technology can completely disrupt, right? And of course, a company, like you say, very high level business model is a combination of the end of multiple of them.
Multiple small ecosystems working together.
Exactly, and processes combined and stitched together. And then over the years, the bigger the company, the more complex it becomes. Then it's about, and if you don't have this mentality of innovation, it's very difficult to actually simplify it, because one day it will become really, really, really difficult, right? And it becomes almost not impossible job, but it's becoming harder.
Because I hear you using the word innovation now, that you want to have even if you get a problem to solve, I want to increase the efficiency in this finance process. The mindset you still need to take is not, I'm going to change my ERP system, or I'm going to change my reporting setup. What you're really saying is, how do I innovate this process? How do I have an innovation mindset where I'd really then truly understand, okay, what is the real problem here? Is complexity based on technical depth, whatever, right? Exactly. So this is then, this is what we need to innovate or fix. So this innovation mindset then applies also, fragmented on highest level, but also in the way we approach, solve problems.
Exactly. And it's the mindset as well, right? Because what's so important is actually to build this type of competences as well. Because that's normally when the post-mortem analysis that you do after something didn't work.
Exactly.
That ends up saying, oh, wow, you know what? it actually we didn't have enough innovation here. We didn't have enough things to actually change because it's given and we cannot change it. So we let it be 1 more year or 2 more years. And of course, I mean, complexities in different systems or companies depends the complexity of every single company, right? So we also have to respect for that. But the mindset is so important, right? And the mindset that's why you need to incubate certain teams and invest. I always encourage to invest in certain teams that can incubate the new mindset, challenging mindset, challenging the status quo. So process get changed. Also technologies that we have get used in the right way.
Yeah.
Right. And then the combination of all of that is what creates a new value proposition, a new business model that certainly before we didn't realize. We thought it was given and that we couldn't change it.
I think this is awesome. But let's jump from Electrolux. Was the next step in your career into Ericsson?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So what was the transitioning? How did you start in Ericsson, and what was that all? How did that work?
Yeah, so
and we're moving to Ericsson.
Exactly. So now in Ericsson, we've come to manage the digitalization of the group supply organization, right? Very similar challenges with a lot of ambition about what needs to be digitalized. Digitalization in the sense of the data and how do we make and connect to the whole corporation, the data efforts, our data foundations, and how they have to be connected to each other. Building with ambition, of course, along the way to create the foundations to create AI, right? So the experience is by managing the data that I had before, building these applications, data mining, enabling different types of organizations. That's the same approach with innovation, taking into this new role and into a fantastic company that is constantly thinking of technology advantage and how do we actually compete and continuously be competitive in the market, right? With also very, very number of tools that are extremely our hand, right? So a lot of legacy, but of course a lot of opportunities as well to improve and to change.
But and how would you frame your role right now?
So I'm heading a group and build a unit, digitalization in group supply. So I'm head of digitalization there. And in group supply, we work very closely with the business. I'm embedded into the business, which is also a very different approach, and it's quite unique in the field. And not many supply chain organizations have embedded this type of role, right? So it's quite progressive as well, I think, what we are doing.
So if I look at the whole Ericsson map, you're in. For someone who doesn't know Ericsson, it's like we have R&D, we have supply chain, we have the markets in different ways. So we are now in the supply chain part of Ericsson.
Exactly, supply chain, and that's taking care of all the products that we produce.
From where to where?
We get it all the way from getting the components or getting material.
Sourcing components.
Exactly. Producing them, and then delivering to the customers. Right?
So the manufacturing plants of Ericsson belongs to supply chain in Ericsson speak.
Exactly. So the manufacturing inspired supply chain is a full end-to-end supply chain. And then there's of course a very large organization. Ericsson has different areas, different groups serving the customer in different parts of business model, the digital business, the network or hardware business, and so on.
Yeah, and just to give someone a very quick overview of Ericsson that doesn't know it. So we have our classical radio base station business, and where we have evolved the standard 3G, 4G into 5G. Yeah. And basically from a supply chain perspective, you still need to develop and supply 4G products and now also 5G products.
Exactly. And
so you can't, and actually you need to have maintenance SLA for parts.
Exactly.
Probably not to 2G anymore. Is that end of life yet?
No, but it is. We got now 5G is where we are, right? And that's the future, and it's expanding, and so. And 6G is coming.
So, I think the R&D is on 6G now since a couple of years back.
Exactly. So that is. So it is. But it's a very large organization, Ericsson, with a lot of focus on innovation, I would say, our technology and technology leadership. That's what we keep saying also to the market.
But if I now take it then, because now so the supply chain digitalization spans, innovating and 10xing from sourcing to manufacturing to hardcore logistics.
Exactly.
Out to the markets.
Yeah. So it's a very broad perspective, right? And this broad perspective also leads us, for instance, in manufacturing, we have dedicated teams and a dedicated head of Industry 4.0.
So now you can do 5G smart factories on your own, on yourself.
Exactly. I mean, that's what we have in our factory.
I've heard some stories on some of the new factories are super cool in Ericsson. Yes, exactly. Super cool.
They are. And of course, I mean, that is evolving into a huge, especially from the digitalization perspective, right? I mean, getting all our data together, putting models and start building models and successfully developing some of them. And also learning from failures that we had where we couldn't get it out, that we didn't have enough business knowledge or the opportunity and didn't work, right? So over the years, I mean, that is a good thing that we have learned many things. We have tried out many things, and I think it's an evolving ecosystem, right? But in this area, when it comes to digitalization, I mean, that has been what we've been working quite a lot, has been to first our foundation, building and taking care of our foundation. And with that foundation, paving the way for a transformation where we see AI first. And that's the mentality that we need to go.
And would you argue that how far spread is this? Because we talked about single teams can do something, but how do you cross the chasm? How do you basically get the enterprise mindset all the way? So on this particular expression, AI first, how far has where do you, would you, as Ericsson as a whole, are everybody on board? Do we all, or is it something that is sort of, no. This is really hard, right?
Exactly.
Because even to understand what AI first means people need to put a lot of effort to even understand that. And then in large enterprise, of course, everybody cannot be on the same spectrum at the same time.
Exactly.
Someone is leading because it's more relevant there, and someone needs to figure it out later.
Exactly. And sometimes the front runners normally is the one facing the problems first and fixing it.
That's what I meant, right?
So
who's the front runners? Who has the AI?
I will say, I mean, there is a broad spectrum in Ericsson. Towards our customers, we're doing a lot. And a lot of my work as well with the teams are to focus in the internal. How do we actually look and develop the customer? There is, of course, a transition where we are very, very much obvious about that. There will be there is a hope. Yes, there is AI first, and there is a team building from IT, from us, and supply together, building that ecosystem where we say how we're going to execute AI at scale, how we're going to industrialize AI models. To get started first is we start asking the question. Sometimes when you actually talk about AI first, you actually say we never start with the AI question. You actually start with the business question and then come with how AI then will solve. And for us, we're going to solve with AI this problem. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes we cannot solve it, and it's not an AI case. But still, we can use technology to solve it.
But in one way, the way I have imagining what we really mean when we say AI first has something to do with what we talked about before, that we take the AI competence next to the business model competence right in the start of our business strategy, right in the start of our operating model strategy. So for me, it's not AI first that AI comes before the business problem. It goes hand in hand. So you don't do AI as an afterthought. You don't slap AI on top of an analog process. To me, that's what AI first means, that we really need to have data and algorithms at the core, and when we devise our strategies to understand how will our strategies play out with AI.
Exactly.
So if you don't have that competence in the room when you make your strategy, if you don't have that competence in your room when you make operating models, then you're analog first.
Yeah.
This is so this is how I understand AI first. Sometimes I think people misunderstand.
Yes. No, you're fully right. I think it's the connection, right?
Yeah.
And that is normally in the journey of many different companies. That's actually what you need to see and you need to strive for it, which is without the competence, knowing what AI can do.
Exactly.
You don't even are able to imagine a strategy where AI will come first. You only think you're going to leverage something that is in a box, or you're going to buy a product.
And why is this so hard to get across? Because I think it's that simple, right? Sometimes we draw a Venn. We love to draw Venn diagrams, and you can have like one circle with domain expertise competence. So we are world class in telco, and we know telco industry and the telco business and radio business inside and out. And here now we understand data, AI as another core domain competence. And what happens when we put the Venn diagram together and you start understanding the new company will live in the intersect. So the new company is the core, right? Where we then say, well, it's not like we have business over here and data AI over here. What happens when the whole company lives in this intersect? How do we then imagine our strategy? How do we then imagine our supply chain?
Exactly. No, and I think that is normally one of the challenges that are easy to say, of course, and we know it. That's, how we connect it and we know the problem, but execution, it requires a lot of effort. That's where you go into the change management. Right?
And what do you think is the underlying, why is this so hard and challenging? Why is this hard?
First, because you didn't have the competences. So
they have different lingo. They don't understand each other.
You don't speak the same language, and you normally are coming from a world. Most large organizations, you come from a world of waterfall, where you ask and you give a demand to somebody, and that demand is fulfilled within a SLA, right? You're never really working hand in hand. So, and it has been a lot like, okay, it's the problem of somebody else that will solve it. That I still need to deliver. I still need to do my process, my own work, right? And that's fair enough. That's how it is. But I think that is one of the reasons why it's so difficult, because it takes time to build the competences that understand to make this team to work. And then when you have it there, you also want to start. It really needs to be embedded in every single way to do, right? And we have a lot of good success stories where one of our organizations just last week released one of the products. We make a party and we celebrate it. Now we have created. We're celebrating AI. It's a model, right? And I cannot tell you too much about the model, but it's a model where we help a lot of people to actually do the work and have a lot of more time to do other interesting stuff in the business. So, and that is impossible, or very, very much difficult, if you didn't have competences, and I call it also digital advisors, that actually help the organization understand, yes, some of your demands make sense, some of what you want to achieve is possible, and here is what needs to happen, right? And then partnered with almost like an account executive inside the company, suggesting all the different ways that we actually can work and utilize data, utilize AI. And I think it's almost like the design, the setup, the design needs to be so in that process. And actually, I think we are in that approach.
And so what you're saying here, the way you design now your organization and your interface, or how you talk about this, a lot of your success will boil down to how you understand this. Because if you design this in the wrong way, you will get not a waterfall project, but you will get the waterfall thinking, analog first, waterfall into the data perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is really hard. I think another reason why this is hard, I test it on you. If you've been in an industry for 50 years, 100 years, Ericsson or Scania, 100 years, you have lived in a fairly stable paradigm where for Scania it's been, we are world class in internal combustion engines, ICE, right? Or in radio base stations. So you have gone to a phase where you're pioneering, and when you work together with garage style is many, many years ago, and now we've started to separate
for efficiency, makes sense in something that is mature. We've been starting to work in our different functions. And now all of a sudden, when we are sort of in a new interface where data AI is completely converging and we need to now rethink this, this separation of task between data and AI and business doesn't make any sense again. So here we have an organizational pattern that was relevant for the mature phase of the analog era of telco, if I say it like that. And now we need to rethink that when we put data AI into everything, right?
Yeah.
So something here is also why this is, we can mentally say and understand this, but our organizational patterns are the way we have cut mandates, the way we have cut the design, makes then us fail before we even start.
Exactly. And it's that design for failure, right? and then to start again, right? So I think, and that's probably when I talk to people asking, I mean, like, how should we set up this from the beginning?
Yeah.
And that's normally the advice I give. I say, you actually need to build it together. Because if you don't, then you will end up inevitable into the old ways of working, into demand and supply. And I give you something and I allocate a budget, and that's the only thing you do, right? So it is
so you think on this.
Yeah.
And how did you arrive here? Because I'm sure if you go back in your career 10, 15 years, you would not have been able to articulate the problem like you do today.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
So,
I remember.
Do you remember when you started to say, this is more important than anything else, how we design cross-functional? Yeah. When did that come to you?
I think this was pretty much my DHL times. To be honest, I think DHL is such a fantastic company in that sense, the yellow family, because it requires a lot for a company to be as big and to integrate something like you will call legacy, like the mail services, post, together with innovative, groundbreaking logistics, right? In that experience, a lot of the work that we've done was very typical, where I was realizing, okay, you have a lot of things demanding IT to give us, and solutions and tools, and okay, I'll create my visualization, I'll code it myself, I realize. Then I realized I'm actually only giving demands to people. And then we had to I remember in that time, there was not enough technology to manage data management. So we're looking at our customer lists and customer IDs, looking at our customers and collaborating with one great guy and one great team to clean it up manually.
And how fast was that? And how these worked?
And it was extremely, it was frustrating at times, right? Because you didn't align. And so that made me think a lot about the need where actually the moment I collaborated in this way, the moment it actually is not rocket science, it's basic organizational design, human behavior, collaboration, right? But sometimes I was put in a position where me and my team and he and his team, we were able to collaborate so closely. We also sit in the same floor, by the way, in Deutsche Post, in the Post Tower.
So all of a sudden now, this is, you see the difference. Why does it work here with this team, and why doesn't it work over here as efficiently? And it becomes super simple.
And then you realize, well, in that time, I didn't call it cross-functional.
No.
Let's call it, I work really well with them. We understand the language, and I come from what I want to achieve in my reports and what I want to create and the insights and the analysis that I have to do for the CEO in that time. And it worked really well, but it didn't go that well in other aspects, right?
And then you could see the difference. What was the difference in how we collaborated,
exactly,
in our relationships, in our mandate, and how we were communicating to each other.
Yeah.
Here, collaborative, same team. Yeah. Cross-functional, you could argue now. We didn't use that word 10 years ago as much.
Exactly.
And here, supply demand. I want this from you, and we are back, me and them.
Exactly. And that was that. And that is when you realize, okay, it's a separate setup of teams, right? Yeah. And then, of course, that I took with me. Great experience. And I almost didn't reflect about it too much. I knew it worked better with one team. Right,
and over the years, it's just been stronger and stronger.
Exactly, and then it became like, okay, this is actually the best way to get things done, right? And then me getting much into the data and AI world, working now in Electrolux, for instance, with IT, working with other functions, with sales, when I was in marketing and so on, with the market units, and realizing that when the more problems we had was also when we was more, I give you my demand and you give me something back. If not, I escalate. It changed completely when we completely changed the behavior that this is one team.
You have the same problem, you have the same goal.
Exactly. And we made it work, right?
But and when you have experienced it, it's such a simple, no rocket scientist, no brainer. My guess, I'm thinking, why don't everybody see it? Why don't we just go here? And I think it's one of these things you need to have experienced it, and you need to have made this learning to really internalize how important this is. Otherwise, we're going to end up in this organizational short boxing drawing, and then we're optimizing. We need to optimize for efficiency. We need to optimize our FTE number. And we don't realize, oh my God, you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater here. You're killing the patient.
Exactly.
So, and that's I think, and no one, everybody who has had this similar experience like you described, I had it very, very similar. We, in our hearts, we want to design the whole company right now in relation to data and AI, with that core principle is one of the most important.
Exactly. It's like, and then it becomes a byproduct.
Yeah.
Right. All the success that comes, but it needs to start with the design.
Yep.
And that is where I know and I experience, and probably because I had good experiences and bad experiences, like everything in life. That's why I realized, okay, this is what it works also for me, where I also become more effective. Yeah. Right. And of course, that's what I try to pass on my teams, right? And people that I care a lot and I work together with. So,
but moving a little bit, this is great, this discussion. And to frame it, I think when we do our minutes, Goran, when we look at the topic here, we've had the core topic at this point in time and 10 minutes before has really been about the cross-functional team and how we really get businesses and IT, to take away that chasm. I think it's a very important topic. But you said something before. You said something that you were quite proud of, that in some ways, the way you have worked with digitalization now in supply chain is a little bit unique. It's a little bit, you used the word embedded. Could you please elaborate on how what is it that you are thinking about, and how do you work your data and digitalization strategy, and what do you mean with that?
Yeah, because I think when I mean embedded is that normally it's this demand supply kind of relationship with IT, with legacy systems, and how we maintain things, right? The smart, I think what is really smart and is helping us. I cannot tell that everything goes easy and smooth, right? But what it helps us and what it becomes unique is that, especially in an organization or in supply chain where there is a lot of relationships between steps into a process. You have suppliers, you have customers, and in between you have a lot of different logistical chains and tools and everything that you can use around. Of course, it becomes a lot easier to actually manipulate and use the data, or not use the data, but rely in a core system to do it. So it's very difficult, and the innovation that comes more as a response. In most of industries, they come as a response of disruption. And it's normally true for many, right? But still, it's the way that supply chains have been working and managing in different parts of the organization, in different companies. Right?
So you start follow now. We have a big part of supply chain. We have a big core system, as has been the way to sort of get efficiency through the supply chain. Is that sort of where we are coming from?
Exactly. And then looking at normally supply chains is around transactions, right? So in many different companies is the way that you manage the transactions, and the more efficient you are in managing the transactions, the orders from customers, and how do you deliver those products, or in whatever industry you are, it's the same. It's a model, right? That's how supply chains work. And you optimize. I mean, there's a very old book called The Goal that's like a Bible for people working in supply chain that talks about, how you identify constraints in your systems, how do you identify constraints in the way we work, and so on. So it's kind of it's a science almost, right? But that is how it works. So what has happened, and I think what also we've been told to be unique in the sense that we have embedded that now supply chain is not anymore about the transactions. It's something more. The way that we're going to figure out what is this more, it could be the customer, it could be the supplier, and integration of these ecosystems where our data is connected, is actually through connecting the information together, through creating information models, through creating data that is very well structured, where we design architectural patterns that goes along our organizational patterns, right? And then that is why it's unique. So instead of becoming just a demand organization, you start becoming and really embed the power and the knowledge of what data can do, AI can do, into the actual business decisions. So then when we discuss the specific business decision, then data is not anymore something that, or should be, or that's the goal, that it doesn't become anything more that is not utilized in the efficient way, but it actually shows and provides multiple scenarios, right? And so that is the purpose, and that's why it's a bit unique. Many organizations still manage data through supply. But I see it more and more in common. Every time I connect with peers in different industries, there are more and more companies and very large, different size organizations that are thinking in the same way.
But I'm trying to follow. So if I put my words on it to see if I connect with you or if I'm completely misunderstanding it. So what you're saying is that in every part of a supply chain, you have steps which are sort of distinct operating models that does something that then goes to the next step in the ecosystem, so to speak.
Yes.
The value chain of the supply chain, but actually looking at this now as an operating model. And now instead of looking at the process and then look at data like this, it sounded like you now look at hardcore architecturally. I mean, like really what I'm hearing is domain-driven design, really flipping the business model to the data model. Can you express your operating model in code?
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about here? That you're really, what you're doing, so instead of having someone else down here working, supporting, as a supply to this digitalization team, is helping translating the whole operating model of this value chain step into a data model that becomes, now we can start understanding architecturally, technically, where does this algorithm fit in
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good. You explained it so well. So it's exactly like you think about any kind of supply chain. It's a bunch of isolated processes sometimes. Yeah. Now instead, these processes, they get connected to each other, and they are a flow. That flow is with embedded AI. We know where AI can help.
Exactly.
And then we know where and how the data flows. So ideally, the goal for us and for many organizations applying this model is, of course, you will want to have real time. In real time, you want to know where the process, the flow needs to improve, and where and how, who needs to act to do it, right? Without waiting for any kind of change in a core system, because it's given to you already. And that is completely changing the way that not only the teams work, but also is completely changing the way that the supply chain will work. Because now you will have, because of AI embedded, then we are actually going, and the ambition should be for many companies is to differentiate what the data, and maybe let's say an AI will give you a recommendation of 5 different options. And now it's embedded into a process. It's not anymore okay, now we have to ask for a change in the process, or we need to ask permission if we can actually do this or that. That is the goal where the new future of supply chains are going in all kind of different companies.
Yeah, and it wasn't me who was smart and well articulated to say it like that. It was actually, I stole the words of Mikael Klingvall, who is our CTO and head of R&D in Derdax, who basically, we are working on exactly this topic right now to understand very simple concept. In order to understand how we modularize a big value chain, going out of monolithic thinking to data mesh thinking, call it whatever you want, we need to start thinking about domain-driven design. Because what happens now in this flow, you have, and we talk about algorithms, of course, it's very different to work on a sourcing algorithm compared to a warehouse algorithm, right? Yeah. So here now we need to have the bounded context of information and understanding domain-driven design. And then a very simple idea comes. Ultimately, what does it mean when we are closing the chasm between data, AI, and organization? So if I argue now, like here we come from an operating model view, and here now we come from hardcore, something that is expressed in code. And ultimately expressed in code, okay, we do domain-driven design to sort of separate the different flows in the supply value chain. So we started thinking, what happens when you look at operational design or organizational design based on business domain-driven design? So basically you start thinking about your organizational design to be one-to-one with how we have learned to do these things in code. And what is the value now? Because now all of a sudden we get closer and closer and closer to be able to express our core business and in code. And when we have imagined how we can understand our business in this vector space, if I steal Elon Musk, now we can put AI and we can put algorithms in the different parts. Because as long as if you can't express your operating model or business model in code, it's going to be a hard time to seamlessly infuse AI everywhere. Exactly. But if you can solve that, which is actually not that hard, because from a business system point of view, that's what we do. We do domain-driven design, we do different things in order to express the data model, the business model. So what happens when that competence is now transferred into the design of organizations and operating model, and then these merges?
Exactly. And that is, I think, that is the source of probably disruption for many industries.
This is a huge disruption to understand that. And all we did now it's very simple, because we went from a business know-how, and then we dug deep into software engineering know-how, and then we flipped. What happens if we take normal methodologies for software engineering and apply them back into how we think about how we design business?
Exactly.
And ultimately now, where is the gap? There's no gap left.
No, exactly.
It's the same.
No, it's the same. And that's, I mean, you put the example of Elon and Tesla, right? I mean, that is exactly what the approach was, to create a new value proposition to customers.
Exactly.
Offering a superior product in that time that everybody else had to catch up with, right? And we have the same examples in many other companies, in many industries, doing exactly the same, right? The challenge we face in bigger organizations is that it's not that easy to do the change.
No.
That's why you need to embed it.
You need to embed it, because ultimately I come to the same conclusion. If you follow the trajectory, if you say AI first, we have said, I've used the word DARDAX, data AI ready, and then we have sort of tried to summarize this. When are you data and AI ready? So data and AI part as core business, expressed as code. So when you get to a point where data and AI is a seamless, natural day of the core business discussion, allowing you to express your work as code, this is sort of a state of mind. Because when we start thinking about that, then we need to organize differently. We have the platform teams, okay, we have them in central CTO teams, but the embedding means, if I'm in supply chain, of course, there is an AI guy next to the supply expert, domain expert, in the line of operation now, because we are in my normal operating flow. There is algorithms that needs to be monitored, tweaked, and improved every time. Yeah. So if I put the idea of DevOps in normal business supply chain operations, it's heavily infused with AI models, you end up in a team which simply has more facets in the core team. Exactly. It's nothing else.
It's nothing, exactly. And that's why we started this about the team, right? Exactly. Because eventually, and maybe this is the great combination when you talk about AI first, the teams and so on, and this juncture, because AI stops becoming a fancy word. People start not thinking, oh, wow, this is too complex. How are we going to do that right now? Last week, we had a celebration. And that I was so happy to see that the business talking how great this new capability is now going to be deployed and we're going to use it. And I've been seeing it so many times over the years. when it finally happens, right? That AI is so embedded that people are not afraid and they start trusting. Because that's the point. I mean, many times when you have talked about AI, ethics in AI and trustful AI and so on, it's all about knowing what it does.
Yes.
And you know it better when it does, when you have a cross-functional team, you have a partner, you have an advisor next to you that guides you until you are ready to go by yourself, right? And it's a continuous innovation cycle.
And so if you think carefully about all the trust issues and all that we have, to some degree, I could argue they are a consequence of separating the business and AI people.
Exactly.
So if you start with the simplest algorithm and you build it together with a business person, and it's the stupidest, simplest algorithm, and I understand exactly what it does, it's clear to me. And then I add something one more time. The business person knows the whole time how this has evolved.
Exactly.
Why would they not have trust? Why would they not understand what has happened, right?
Yeah, because at the end, I mean, what is AI, right? I mean, AI is just automating decisions that we humans take in milliseconds. And AI is trying to mimic that, right? So how do you trust a person? That's how you should actually ask the question, right? You ask the person because you know it, you know it's trustworthy, you know the person will tell you the truth, will give you options, and then you will make a decision based on that, right?
But you slipped in an AI definition here that I really liked.
Okay.
Say that again. How did you define AI? It's actually an automated, say it again.
It's a human. It's a human. It's automating a human mechanism to do things like we normally do as a normal thing, right? And we drive a car. I was trying to explain this to my daughter yesterday. But, and you drive a car, you move your hands, you work with your legs, and you do all the mechanism things that you normally do as a human, right? The AI has been coded and replicated what human would normally do to steer the car and to do different parts of this.
But what I like is that this is an interesting way of looking at this that I haven't thought about, but I really like it. Because if you take autonomous driving, right? Oh, it's about driving a car, steering a car, and then it's easy to think about the different mechanisms. But you said something. What you're doing is you're automated the micro decision making that we are doing as a human being. So if we truly understand what driving a car means from a decision science point of view, I need to break it down. Okay, what is happening when I'm driving a car? I'm making split-second decisions all the time. Should I gas? Should I stop? Should I look in the mirror? What should I do? So it's a network of decisions we're doing in microseconds that overall looks like magic. We can drive a car.
Exactly.
And what we are doing now is, if you think about that, we are automating micro decisions in a system in order to achieve then the purpose of safe driving.
Exactly.
This is what we are doing as people, right? And now, so if you take away all the magic here, we don't even. So in order to reach that goal, you don't need to mimic consciousness. No. You need to mimic what are the micro decisions that the human does in order to safely drive a car. Exactly. So in some ways, demystifying and taking away all the magic here.
Yeah, exactly. And that is when you start trusting it, because you realize actually it's mimicking something, it's giving me something that then I can actually spend the time in something else, right? And when we take that exact example of the car, we take it to a process of supply chain or a process of marketing or a process of sales, even how you sell something in a grocery store, there is where the micro decisions happen.
Yes.
There are some things that AI now is capable of doing. Mm-hmm. Perhaps there are other things that still need to take us more time because it's more complex and so on. And then I think where we are going is more into connecting all these different AIs and make them work together.
And so maybe this is, how do we understand narrow AI versus general AI? Mm-hmm. And one argument is that I've been thinking about this. I have no scientific position on this at all, but I'm sometimes imagining, what if what we perceive as general AI is used a huge mesh of super small narrow AIs working super efficiently together?
Yes, exactly.
what is it really that we need? I mean, like maybe it's the parts of super narrow AI that is super good at super microscopic tasks, and then it's the meshing of combining it really blazingly fast for different things.
And then it comes again. I mean, we got the topic of organizational design and patterns, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine when we get the point to many organizations are able to make these connections. That also means that across an organization and across geographies, you need to be able to have a lot of people that understand. It's not just few people in the headquarters that understand the connection, but it's a lot of more people.
Yeah.
That's when it's embedded into our way of working, because if it doesn't become something hype anymore, it becomes something that you actually can co-create. You even somewhere in the US or in India or in China, you actually can change the network, adapt it by yourself, right? And you co-create and you create this mesh kind of concept, right? But that is why organizations, I think this is probably not only valid for supply chain, this is valid for so many different types of industries where you need to create this type of competences and let these competences be very close to the business. So then you actually can, together at the end of the day, cross-functionally, create the disruption that every single business will face and faces constantly.
Me and Mikael, when we prepared the Data Innovation Summit keynote this spring, when you start thinking about this and you start understanding, well, okay, if this is a mesh, okay, if there's domains, microprocesses, microservices, microalgorithms everywhere, everything is connected. Mm-hmm. We have the possibility to do everything. Mm-hmm. Now, to get here and to capitalize on that, we started to understand and brainstorm and visualize how does leadership and middle management change? You know, what type of roles do we need? How do we need to act on this? Mm-hmm. And we basically try to frame it and define it as there's some new roles in this that we need to have that doesn't really exist in normal corporations today. And we frame the words, we need the people who can work as orchestrators. Mm. Actually, we haven't been used to working in cross-functional team, and how can we orchestrate for value from the supply chain, the workflow, to the algorithm, to the data? There's an orchestration problem. Yeah. Then we need federators. So if we do these algorithms and everything, how can we start putting them in a mesh so they become harvestable and reusable? Mm-hmm. So now we're doing Metcalfe law, right? So how do we achieve network effects? Yeah. How do we avoid orphan analytics, that this algorithm can only be used here, but how can we get network effects? So this is now, then you need to federate what is happening one part of the organization so it can be used as a big graph, imagining a graph.
Exactly.
And then we realized that the next level of problem becomes when everything is connected, we can potentially do anything. And now we need to start navigating the opportunity landscape. So now it's a little bit like, we could do, imagine like 10 years down, everything is connected, we could do anything. Now it's the choice. Mm-hmm. Which problem is useful to solve, and therefore which microservices or algorithms are useful to connect.
Exactly.
So we get to some sort of different type of problem that has to do with orchestration, federation, and navigation when everything is connected and when this mesh truly exists, right? So, and this is a little bit changing to the traditional line manager.
I agree. And I think also, I mean, the question maybe many companies should be asking themselves is, do they have the chance to actually do that already when the mesh is there? No, right? You actually need to prepare for that. You actually need to build it. You actually need to have these competences and build it across.
Because it's a little bit like lighting up a massive graph. Mm. You need to, of course, you don't have all the nodes at the beginning, but you need to have a fundamental idea that I'm node by node building a mesh. Node by node, I'm doing something that creates value here and now, but it's at the same time increasing my data AI DNA. It's growing the mesh.
Exactly.
And so this means that some people at least needs to be ahead of the game. Yeah. I mean, like you get to these different phases. Yeah. We need to excite people to get going on this journey. Then we need to explore and really learn how it's supposed to be done. And then when we start nailing it down, we need to expand on that investment and go in this direction.
Exactly.
And then ultimately extracting value and capitalizing on it.
Of course, yeah.
But it's quite challenging, right? Because it's not like you need to be a huge investment up front to have the whole mesh, but you need to strategically start investing in this direction, I think.
Exactly. No, yeah, obviously, because again, back to the disruption, right? When you don't do that, and if you are not prepared, then you are not there. That people should see it as drastic as that, right? And some industries allows you for the level of capital that you have, and so that yes, you can adapt later on. But normally, it's not really the case. So but it's a fascinating. It's fascinating. What I really like it is when we put this type of concepts that we've been talking in our industry, data and AI, and how do we deploy it and how do we become efficient. And so now we are getting into this stage of it's not only the data and the AI and the analytics that we put, it's actually how the organization is designed to make it work, right?
Okay, I think this is the real problem in many ways. I mean, like, for me, that has been my. I think that's what I have tried to wrap my head around for years now, and that has been my sort of real, focus. Because I think that's where it ends up. That we're not going to get further by only throwing more tech on this. We need to understand how we organize the tech, but more importantly, not how we organize the tech, but how we fundamentally organize and design our teams and business in order to be data AI ready, in order to receive it or embed it.
Exactly. That's to me is the real game changer in many industries.
Yeah.
And if you nail that, your chances of succeeding in the AI or data journey dramatically increases.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because then even if you fail in certain areas, you still have the competences, you still have that opportunity landscape that keeps opening up on more and more and more. It's in your DNA, right? So I really like what you say.
But we take it afterwards. But it's really like going into the left or the right door. So are you setting yourself up on the trajectory to fail before you started, or are you setting yourself up to basically, okay, fundamentally we are on the right path. We will fail we will stumble for sure, but it's like, is this fundamental game changer that we are on a trajectory that is sort of taking us forward.
Exactly. And I think that's absolutely, and that's the type of mindset that leaders, people, anybody working on the field need to really understand.
Yeah, and here I think it's also then, if you are not exposed to data and AI, it's very hard to see this difference of you and me are talking about now. So I think also here, the industry, me and you in our roles, have been failing because we have not been good enough to take this conversation on the organizational design in such a way so it really connects and they are changing.
Exactly. It has been a lot of tech discussion, right?
I can really look at myself and I can see this. I have taken a lot of tech discussions thinking I was having a business discussion when I wasn't really.
No, exactly. No, I fully, and that's also you learn by experience, right? Because and normally sometimes when I talk to my data scientists, to my data advisors, and we always come to that conclusion, right? We're talking a lot about the type of algorithm that we're gonna create, and then you realize people will not.
We love it. It's fun, but it's like. We forget that we are talking from our domain perspective.
Exactly.
And we need to first have empathy with the business domain perspective and start there.
Exactly. And they have other problems. They have to day-to-day deliver. They have so many other things.
Yes.
And I think that is the tricky part. And that's probably the area where to succeed, is to embed it so much that everybody starts thinking in these two directions, right? And it becomes a natural cycle.
Yeah.
How do you build?
But let's spend a couple of minutes. This is super good. I love this conversation. I'm not sure the listeners love it, but for me, this is so many learnings right now. But I'm a little bit curious. Could you go a little bit practical with us on how have we sort of your tech stack and you are thinking about your technology setup and how you're working more practically, how has that evolved the last couple of years? So how are you setting it up? Because you said it, we need to design the teams and all that, but it depends also on how your technology is set up and how you're thinking about these topics.
Yeah. So, and I think we've gone and we tried different things.
Yeah.
A few of the things that we are now, I would say that has been really the differentiator in the way to push and also to get the change going is not only to have technical team that collaborates and works very closely with IT to embed the right technologies. Then we start talking about creating data products. We're the first ones out creating and working with IT to get these data products live in a marketplace and so. But that's not enough, right? So then, and the same with AI. A lot of AI models, data scientists in our AI execution team working and designing and industrializing some of them and solving what are the type of problems we have. But that's one area, right? The other area is actually what I call digital advisors, right? So we created this kind of role where we say, look, in the beginning we have very different profiles that all still are relevant, from business analysts, from IR coaches and so on. But we realized we need actually something more business related that can talk tech, that can talk business, and that can make sense to a business. In a business language can make sense to somebody who is going to listen why this is so important, right? That is the role that we created, the digital advisors or digital partners, right? It's very senior people with a lot of experience, either in the data field, lead data scientists, some of them from before, or in the business, or a combination of both, right? That I think has been one of the greatest successes we've been having, because it has actually addressed the problem of change management. It has actually addressed the problem of not getting enough out of the data that we're getting, because now we're talking about value. Now we're talking about, okay, this is not the value realization, but this is the adoption that we're going to make, and so. And I'm not sure if we were the first ones creating this concept, but I kind of steal it from pride from a lot of tech industries and what you normally call the account executive, right? You have a sales executive that takes care of the account. For us, the account is one of our business units, and this business units, this digital advisor understands all the different pains, understands what you want to solve, where the process you're getting stuck, and then goes back to the team and say, okay, now this is the technology, this is the opportunity we can find. And then, of course, once we try it, then we can industrialize it. That model, I really believe on. And I think now it's paying off a lot, what we're doing.
Because I think I fully understand what you're saying, because this is also a challenge because you're in a global context. Because you can argue we can embed things and we can be close to the teams. We said that. Then you have the next problem. How am I close to a business unit in Peru? Right. Yeah. And here all of a sudden now we need to now start identifying the data opportunity or the digital opportunity together with them to get them excited and to really solve the problem worth solving to the individual business unit. So even if you have a lot of good stuff, what they need in Germany versus like a core market versus what they need in a emerging market in Africa might be very, very different, right?
Exactly. No, it is not only they need different, but they also need a different speed. They have different landscape, sometimes different tools and stuff. So of course, all of that needs to be put into the context, right? So that's why it's so important. And also some practical problem, of course. I mean, if you're realistic about organizations, you're never gonna, if you want to embed something, if you have an analyst, a business person working, let's say in supply chain lingo, a planner, right? You're never going to hire as many data scientists to work with a planner, right? So you need to have some kind of a mechanism to be very efficient as well, produce a lot, develop a lot. That's something that makes sense and helps the business. And that's where this role of digital advisors becomes so important for us. And it's paying off, quite a big deal, I would say.
Should we stay more on Ericsson or should we move over to some more themes, like more general topics and philosophical topics?
Wow, I love philosophy. So
no, because we had prepared a couple of different themes to discuss today. And I think there's a segue here from the digital advisor role in the conversation we had now to one of the themes we talked about discussing. And when me and Anders have been talking about this with many guests, we put sort of the label on this, the AI divide. And we are sort of, you can now explore this topic on macro level. Do we think there are tech giants that are on a completely different trajectory and maturity when it comes to AI versus the rest of the world? And, is that good or bad? This is the sort of macro perspective. And then we can discuss countries and regions. Are we falling behind in Sweden on AI compared to China or US? And this now is the divide between the front runners and the rest of the world, and what is the consequence and impact and danger, so it doesn't matter. Then there's another way of looking at the AI divide, and that is going into a large organization and understanding on a micro level the divide between the front runners, so to speak, or maybe even the people working within data and AI who have sort of seen the light. I mean, like me and you, we sit here, this is the new algorithmic enterprise, and we are excited. And for us, let's go, let's design this company and make our business into code, right? And then, of course, if you haven't been exposed to data and AI in your normal business life, you don't have the same starting point in this conversation. So here we have a divide on micro level. And I now want to connect it all back to what you've been really passionate about, with you used the word digital inclusion.
Yeah.
So for me, what we're doing here when we're getting digital advisor, we're working slowly and steadily to take away this chasm, to basically make sure we are all on the same team. We're on the same page here. So this was my setup on the AI divide, moving into digital inclusion. And I just want to hear your 5 cents on this setup. You can take it any way you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you think about it, the example you put, right? Companies, tech companies building and being so high, different, ahead of the rest and differentiating. The question I ask myself is why? Is it the technology they're using? All right, they are inventing something new, right? Who is doing that? The people, right? And so they are getting the talent that wants to do more things and wants to explore and innovate and have the mindset so they can strive. And I think, when we recruit and we look at different profiles, there is always this differentiation that there are some more industries and more companies where a lot of resources are located. There are others where they're not. Others where it's a lot more difficult to get, right? And that is a constant worry I have, to be honest, because I think when we talk about organization, we also talk about generations, exposure to technology. And sometimes that exposure on long is the one that generates the opportunity, the mindset that yes, something actually could be done differently. And there is a divide being built in the world. And also when you also look about how much code kids are being taught in school, some countries are doing that very early, a lot earlier. Not everywhere. Other countries don't even touch it until you go to high degree education, right? And that is very dangerous for how the world will shift.
And why is this a problem? Why do you think it's dangerous?
It's dangerous because you start concentrating. We talk about, some years ago, we talked about data as being the new oil, right? Then the way that you use and the insights that you generate to be competitive in the market is the source of that. And that's the insight is the one that actually generates that kind of competitiveness. So more countries, more companies with that type of embedded and mindset and that type of talent, if you have more of that, you will have, again, more chances to be more competitive and become more dominant in a certain area, right? When it's so imbalanced, when the opportunities are not the same, not only that resources and talent becomes really scarce, but also we are the risk of creating the conditions for having a huge divide where there is a very different way of looking at the world, where people are completely, and there is always early adopters of every technology and so on, but there are people that are running because what its new age of Industry 4.0 and data and technology has shown us from the 2000s is that you can run a lot faster, right? The curve is not anymore a very steady curve. It's just like goes like this. So without the talent, without starting very, very early, every country actually investing really heavily in teaching and showing this to the generations, and new and old, it creates and has the potential to actually disrupt the way that we live. And I hope we're not going to get into that. But that's why I think we actually have to invest. We actually have to teach and get, and not only, and females as well in the tech industry, and kids and young girls, and so get into this business, because you actually need to have all type of cultures, points of view, to be able to actually build something that represents what humans is, right? And that's back to what we discussed some time ago. If AI is a representation of human behavior or human actions and human millisecond decisions, then
it needs to be a fair population representation.
Exactly. Otherwise, only one type of people will only do it. And that's the risk, is the bias, right? And there is a lot of more expert people that can talk about bias and the ethics in AI. But that is one of the consequences that could happen and will happen more if you don't embed.
Okay, let me. One of the reasons on missions, what I coined the company, I founded DareDux. And DareDux is data AI ready. Dux is Latin for guide. And very much, doing my own ikigai, trying to find my purpose in life. I realized that, one of the bubbles when you're trying to sort out what you're good at, what does society need, what can you actually sell to make a living on. The societal topic here, for me, it has been this around how problematic it is if we don't have digital inclusion or data and AI inclusion. And I think you're nailing that down really well. So for me, the core problem of the AI and data divide is fundamentally, if we don't have inclusion, if we don't have diversity in the way the world evolves, it's going to be very, very problematic. And one very simple macroeconomic problem here is that imagine you having the workforce of a whole country. And then I put two different scenarios in front of you. Imagine that whole workforce of that country is disrupted from the outside by 5 companies. 3 that has AI for greed as their motto, 2 that has AI for control as their motto. On the other side, I put a scenario where we must disrupt ourselves. From the individual that realizes that I have so much opportunity in the AI world, not maybe in exactly the job I was doing, because that is typically the type of job an AI could do. But if I educate myself, if I'm willing to disrupt myself, I can find a fantastic career. And then I take that from individual level to organizational level to regional level. And all of a sudden I put the scenario, what do you think is the impact on the Swedish economy if we manage to disrupt ourselves versus we were disrupted by one of the 10?
Yeah.
What's the difference here? I think this can be a very prosperous way forward. This we will have a lot of heavy, because instead of a positive spiral, it becomes a negative spiral, with unemployment and all that kind of stuff. So I think this is very, very important that we understand early.
Exactly. And that's the thing is that, even we talk about the industrial revolutions, right? So before it used to happen in a more steady pace, right? We knew it was going to take many, many years.
Yeah, we could see them even. We could see the shift.
Exactly. And then you see it. But this revolution is different because it's happening so fast. And if you're out a few years, into this area, you lose. You don't know anymore because there is new, even in our area, you need to keep getting to know all the data, all the algorithms that are new and technologies and so on. Imagine if somebody has not even started, right? And that's why I think it's so important. And we need to put a lot more effort. And I think it should be mandatory too.
Yeah, and what in one way pushes me harder, but also scares me, is that when we had guests on this podcast, I have examples of Lars Albertsson Lalle, who worked at Spotify, who worked at Google, and who's successfully really understanding industrialization of data, right? And how does looking at the inside of the data factory, so to speak. Yeah. And if you listen to his podcast, the main argument he has is like, if you haven't worked at Google, if you haven't worked in one of these companies on the inside and on these core things, it's really hard to understand how much further ahead they are in understanding how to industrialize the core mechanisms of treating data and managing data. Exactly. The core mechanics, right? That means data becomes productized, that you can use it for anything, right? The way you treat data from the start, the way you have APIs, everything can be used by anyone in a company like Google. And his argument is a little bit like, even when I try to explain it, it does not make sense if you haven't really understood it. This is how far away they are in terms of getting the basics right. Exactly. And now when they can get the basics right, they can point that opportunity on anything they want.
Exactly. Yeah,
and we don't and how to make this wake-up call, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because we are also part of this traditional ecosystem, right? Imagine you go to school, you learn over numerous years many different things, you're ready to be in the workforce, you find a job and you learn something new, and then you have the time. We always assume we have the time to learn. Soon that will not be the case, right? So not only because it becomes more competitive, but it's differentiator for companies and for countries. To be competitive, you need to be digital.
But okay, and now because if we now break this down then from the macro level and let's now be way more concrete and there's something that we all can touch and we can deal and we can take steps tomorrow in our work. So we can look at the AI divide on the micro level, because ultimately if you want a society to change, the change starts with the people changing, right? Exactly. A society ultimately is made up of people.
All about people.
It's all about people, if it's an individual in an organization, if it's a politician. So here we now come to what are fundamental, simple concepts that helps us close this chasm, because I now argue that in any larger organization that has data and AI as part of the agenda, like Ericsson has, of course, there are many quite super brilliant people who kind of understand this. Now, this is where I find really interesting to connect it back to the digital advisor role and, what are the mechanisms, what are the things we are doing or could be doing tomorrow that starts nudging away at this chasm? Because I don't think it's not a flick of the switch and then everybody understands it, right? Exactly. It's a nudging game we're into, exactly.
Right? Yeah. Is that
this is where this role comes in, mechanisms like this, designs like that. Exactly. What are you thinking?
No, and that's a lot of the thinking, right? It's not just to collect demands. It's to really make through change.
Because that's education, right? Because when you have a digital advisor, and this needs to be senior guys, right? And they have this, and because they are coming into a room with senior leaders, business guys, and in one way they are collecting demands, but at the same time the agenda is to do it in such a way so it excites, and by doing that you need to educate.
Exactly.
So the whole process of collecting demands is also the Trojan horse for education. Is my idea.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a lot of the point. And with all respect, you need to actually show the opportunities. And not only show what is already done, but what is possible, and open the discussion, right? Because when you open it and you have this constructive kind of relationship, and you build this type of relationship through the work that the advisors are doing, then actually you start realizing the change when the business is the one asking. The business person now start realizing, I have an idea now. Now I think this process, we could use this. Do you think it's a great idea? It might not be, but we tell, yes, of course. And now we start looking, because that's when you're already saying, you start changing the mindset, right?
And we're having a deep conversation right now in Scania. I'm not going to name any names, but we think one way of looking at this is, how do I have digital advisor? How do we do data opportunities that creates pull instead of trying to push out tech or push out data science, right?
Yes.
So then, and if you want to create pull, because the whole change scheme becomes different, because all of a sudden when your AI initiative is on the highest of the business case agenda of the business user out there, he will drive the change home because he wanted it.
Exactly.
He said that was more important. It wasn't some sort of head office initiative.
Exactly.
So we are now dealing with the topic, and in my opinion, the digital advisor has the job not to collect demand, but ultimately to create demand and create pull, and therefore having a change readiness that is completely different to when you're trying to push something out.
Exactly.
Would that be a fair assessment?
That is exactly the point. And then, of course, I mean, there is very senior people and very humble. They know huge knowledge on our core business and knowledge in the technology. That's the type of person that will be this go-to person. Like, now I have a question. That's the satisfaction we get. But now we say somebody in the business has a question. How do I do this? These guys and these ladies, they fix it.
Trusted advisor.
They trust the advisor. Then you trust the AI. Because that's the representation, saying, okay, now actually it makes sense because he or she has actually explained that to me, and now I know how to run my business through that, right? So it's
But inclusion is key, and the way to work on it, we can discuss the macro level, and then we can have discussions on investment with politicians. But in reality, if we all focus on the micro chasm and start figuring out the mechanisms, like you have done in Ericsson, stuff like this is what we need.
That's what makes a bit the difference. That's how we move the needle.
That's how we move the needle in reality.
Normally tell that, right?
The needle.
That's how we move the needle, because it pays off, and it's paying off for us already. Yeah. So highly recommend, and happy connect with these guys because they are extremely good.
I might take you up on that, because we are very much in the same global problem. How do I create pull out of Mexico?
Exactly.
Let's take another core theme here that I think is quite interesting. Yeah. And it has all to do with the world evolving right now. And we actually came into it to some degree when we started using the word mesh. And because I think you can expand on that topic quite a bit. So if we start thinking about the future, and I've seen it very clearly working in the energy industry before, now working in the transportation industry. And I think telco is a good example here. So what I understand is that the world is moving more and more into ecosystem thinking. And the very concrete example that blew my head off 10 years ago in Vattenfall was, traditionally you had an energy value chain where you had a large capacity power plant that was producing energy, first step of the value chain, and then you take that production and you put that to the grid, and then you to push it, to create energy that is available in the grid. And the way it works is like the production value chain P&L ends there by selling the production to Nord Pool. So the next step of the value chain in an energy value chain is trading this. And then you have the whole network and how we get the grids to work. And then you have retail. And then in the end, you have someone using the energy, B2B, to create steel or to do mining or to do manufacturing or whatever, or consumer. And the core realization was when we started doing renewables, that all of a sudden we have people putting solar panels on their rooftops. And all of a sudden we have a producer-consumer. We have a prosumer. So all of a sudden this sort of linear one-way value chain starts breaking up in different actors. And we start realizing new actors like Tibber as a retailer, basically starting to look at different models. So within this ecosystem of the energy industry, there is a fundamental flow of electrons that needs to happen, and it is fundamental balancing of electrons. This is the physical representation of the ecosystem from wherever it's, and now the renewable, we have decentralized production. We don't have big one nuclear power plant or whatever. We have many wind parks, we have many different parts, and it will just grow. Then you get to flow of value. So when I have, so the electrons and the electricity bill, what I have paid at home is one thing, but ultimately now when we have super high energy prices, I'm more interested in what I can do to minimize my energy consumption. So all of a sudden there is the fundamental, how do I, there's a service, there's something else here, there's another flow of value. So I pay this spot price for my electrons, but ultimately my real value is to get my bill down. And if someone can get my bill down with 30% just by being smarter, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
So here now we have this ecosystem thinking. And the way I understand this now, in order for this to flow in real time, if you want to balance a grid, if you want to balance a telco network, same, right? And you want to monetize, you want to maximize your ARPU, and you have all these different players, you have all these different, the whole thing is converging between internet and all that ecosystem. And everything is ultimately fueled by an underlying data and algorithms. This is the world I'm seeing, and when we go to the transport ecosystem and you start not seeing Scania as a truck manufacturer, but an actor in the transport ecosystem where ultimately I want to move goods, story points for moving goods. It really, for me, moves the whole thinking to mesh thinking. It really becomes now modularized, distributed, because the decentralization is not only within your own company. It actually needs some of your data over here needs to be part of the data that you monetize in this service that someone else has.
Exactly.
It's meshed, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you so how do you from Ericsson and how do you understand the world? Because I think the telco industry to some degree has been in this ecosystem thinking with roaming and everything.
Of course.
Longer than most industries.
Exactly. Yeah, and probably that's why also in all kind of rankings, also with the telecom industry is the one that highlights the more going through a lot of the technology, breaking the technology barriers, right? Because of that ecosystem, right? Maybe I can give you more an example. Like, I mean, the way that we think in terms of data and the supply chain as well, right? Because it's very, very similar approach. I mean, we talk a lot about ecosystem, and that for us also means now supplier, right? The supplier that was only a supplier, and how the supplier will actually interact with us, and then the customer, and how the customer eventually in the future, because of the business disruptions, will monetize, and this will work in different areas with our data, and we of course therefore also need to monetize our information, our data towards them. The key for all of this is typically we call integration, right? Or the challenge that I see is that, again, there are many companies that are going ahead, that are designing this because they know that is the path. Others that are thinking, no, this is not actually, there is not really an understanding that an ecosystem is the future or the very near future in some cases. Therefore, they have not prepared yet the capabilities to develop that integration between different nodes of this mesh network.
Yeah, and I try. I think one of the key fundamental capabilities that also telco knows well all about is interoperability.
It is. Yeah.
And if I take the learning from the telco ecosystem, take me back to the 3G world when we had CDMA, we had all these different standards for the protocol of how we were sending, how our networks were organized.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, in the end, to really get to where we are today, we had to standardize towards LTE. And we had to fundamentally take a fundamental consortium understanding on some sort of level to secure interoperability.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, because if you, that's why I think the mesh thinking and to say product is so important, because it forces you to think, how can my data be consumed by someone else?
Exactly.
Actually, and how can it be trusted? So I don't even know what they're going to do with this data.
No.
So it has to have an SLA and SLO so it can be bought, and then they can trust my data in order to use it in their service.
Exactly. Yeah.
And here we have interoperability standards. We have these fundamental integration standards that can't be sort of proprietary anymore.
No, exactly. No, it's the
I'm extrapolating where this goes.
no, but I think you're right, and I think it's also the. I mean, I will say it also in a different way. So if one way or the other, it's going to happen that, or you need to be so well connected, it needs to be so well integrated that you need to actually be forced. You need to enable that network to happen.
Yeah.
Because you want to consume data, you want to sell the data.
But imagine if you're not part of the network, are you even relevant?
No.
But and because the point is, in the past we could be part of the network in an analog way.
Yeah.
Right? And we could do something and we could collaborate. But when the hygiene factor is real time, using your data in order to, because my service I'm selling to the customer over here is in real time. So I need now your data to do my part to that customer in real time. And here now we get to the fundamental, it's something else. You know, so that means you need to really think carefully what's your input port, output port, how do you really make it, what's your API to reach this?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, even in a very high level concept, I mean, isn't it that the reason why people are going, or companies want to be in the metaverse? Because you cannot, if you're not there, you not exist, right? Similar in a network, if you're not part of that, you're not prepared to have the capabilities to connect to that network. What kind of business model you're going to disrupt? You're going to just be disrupted all the time, right?
So we're getting to a point where how can you be part of the new economy if you're an orphan in relation to no one can digitally connect to you and to your data?
Exactly. Yeah. And if you make it, I mean, there are reasons why you need to be protected. Of course, there's a lot of security aspects and so on. That's super understandable, but you don't, and you cannot become an island, right? Very risky. So
the biggest risk is to become an island here.
Yeah.
Is that what you do?
And also goes a lot together with the talent pool, right? So, I mean, imagine how many now talent working in data, in AI, building these things. Would they look at a company that doesn't offer this possibility to explore new things and to have opportunities in that area? No, right? So it is becoming an island is basically you don't exist in the network, you're out of the node. Then it will be slow goodbye, unless you really work hard to be part of it and to shape it. Better than to shape it than to be shaped.
And because if the world and industries are moving into ecosystem thinking, you need to understand yourself as an actor in an ecosystem. And then, of course, you can decide and think about which role or which type of actor am I going to be? Am I going to be the platform? Am I going to be at the node? Am I going to be at the center?
Yeah.
But all that falls apart if you can't interact and participate as an actor. Exactly. And the core participation we're talking about is data and AI transactions flowing.
Exactly. And it's that capability to continuously even be ahead of the curve, and to shape it, right? So it is. But
I see the world very similar to you, where this is going.
No, and to some degree, you might say it's scary. Where are we going? To another degree, it's actually some of us fascinating because that's the new reality, right? And all the opportunities that we have ahead are just enormous, right?
And now we're ending up on the last sort of more philosophical questions, sort of rounding up here after more than 2 hours. So would you call yourself summarizing this as a tech optimist? Or, are you a tech optimist, or are you scared of, because all this stuff is in some way scary, right? And then we can think about all the stuff. You mentioned a little bit when we open up into the network thinking, oh my God, how are we going to deal with security?
Yeah.
How are we going to deal with GDPR? How are we going to deal with the AI Act?
Exactly. Yeah.
So ultimately, are you an optimist?
I'm an optimist,
You're an
definitely.
optimist?
And I prefer to have the challenge.
Yeah.
And I prefer to face it. And I think we all need to have that type of mentality. Otherwise, the opportunity disappear, right?
So you see this as exciting and rather than scary.
I see it exciting, but I understand there are many people who find it scary. And that's the people that we need to bridge the gap of digital inclusion.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that wrap up. We need to do the digital inclusion to get to bridge and help the people who are scared to be excited and to be part of the journey.
Yeah.
We all need to be part of the journey.
We are, exactly.
Fantastic. Okay, last questions. If you were going to print a T-shirt out of what we talked about today, or what are the key sort of T-shirt quotes or something we said today that you sort of stuck with you from today? Now, what are the key pullouts?
No, what I really like about our team discussion.
Team is everything.
Right.
That's one T-shirt, right?
It's one T-shirt. It's by itself. It's the most important. And I think also, the ecosystem. When also you talk about micro level, right? Mm-hmm. The ecosystem is also this cross-functional team that makes it happen.
Yeah.
Right. Digital advisor, I hope, is one word because
Okay. How would we frame? Because I'm gonna print some T-shirts for you for your digital advisor. But what should it say? Digital advisor. We need to have a good slogan here.
Yeah. Should we think about breaking the digital divide?
Digital advisors fighting the digital divide.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm going to do it. Digital advisors, and then.
Or closing the gap, so the divide. Yeah,
closing the gap. Yeah. Closing the gap. Good. That's a good T-shirt.
Yeah, I believe in that.
I love it. Okay, and very last two questions. Do you have any what's the next sort of plan moving forward, or something you're really excited about happening now over Christmas or next year?
No, I think it's I'm actually looking really forward to see how society, this hybrid model has changed the way that we do things. Has been a catalyst also in that sense to open the eyes and opportunities. So I'm really looking forward to just capitalize a lot of the investments, effort we've put, and keep driving this momentum, right? Keeping driving and helping people to get to this, not only closing the digital divide, but making AI first really sense embedded in everything. So that's my goal, and I think, and that also that's my key takeaway as well, right?
Awesome.
And of course, Christmas is coming. Spend time with the family, and energizing in this time.
How often are you back in Peru?
Actually, not very much. I have my friends and my family back there that ask me now.
Now's the time.
Now my kids, my youngest one is 6, so I think now they're also asking quite a lot, and they also want to go. So it is time.
So you have a plan somewhere not too far.
Yeah, it's time to go. Yeah.
And then I have one last question. Who could you recommend to come on this pod that you would like to listen to?
Wow. Have you Josephine? No.
Not yet.
Yes, exactly. Has she been in the pod? Okay. Yeah, because she hasn't. Yeah. I would say Josephine is, especially when we talk about AI, ethics, building, closing the divide, having less bias, and so on. I think she would be a fantastic person to talk about, and that's the person I think about, and give her a call every time.
Good, sounds like a great idea. Okay, Danffer, thank you very much for these 2 hours and 10 minutes. Yeah. That has been fantastic, and we have so much more to talk about.
It was super fun, super exciting. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation again.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks.